Her billionaire husband let his mother pack her clothes. She left with 2 bags. His mother shoved Evelyn Carlisle's clothes into a cheap black trash bag, as if 12 years of marriage could be folded, crushed, and thrown out with yesterday's flowers. Silk blouses, tailored coats, red-soled heels, and winter cashmere disappeared beneath her sharp hands, while Evelyn stood in a vivid red dress that made her look less like a discarded wife and more like a verdict waiting to be read. Across the dressing room, Dominic Astor watched in an elegant black suit, one hand around a glass of wine, while Chloe Beaumont stood beside him in a white dress that pretended softness and advertised victory. They thought Evelyn was leaving with nothing. That was their first mistake. Dominic's mother tightened the plastic drawstring and dragged the bag across the marble floor, leaving a faint trail of dust from the closet that had once been arranged by season, charity gala, board dinner, and private resort. "You can collect the rest through an assistant," she said, her voice polished with the kind of cruelty that came from never having to apologize. "Chloe will need space." Chloe lifted her wine with both hands, smiling over the rim like a guest admiring a room she had already chosen to redecorate. Dominic did not look embarrassed. He looked inconvenienced, as if Evelyn's presence had become a small administrative delay before his new life could begin. Evelyn did not reach for the clothes. She did not beg for the dresses she had worn, while standing 3 feet behind him at investor dinners, smiling while he took credit for numbers she had rebuilt at 2 in the morning. She looked at the trash bags, then at Dominic, and the last thin thread of grief inside her went still. The closet was almost 2 stories high, with walnut panels, brass rails, and a private fitting mirror that had reflected every version of her the Astor family found useful. The loyal wife, the silent strategist, the elegant black woman in red, who made Dominic's empire look modern, disciplined, and untouchable. She had been allowed to shine only when her light made him look larger. "You should be grateful," his mother added, stuffing another armful of clothes into the bag. "A woman from your background was given a life most people only see in magazines." Dominic finally spoke, his tone low and controlled. "Do not make this dramatic, Evelyn. Take what you need, and let everyone move on." Chloe gave a small laugh and glanced toward Evelyn's empty jewelry drawer. "She will be fine. Women like her always know how to survive." That sentence landed with more honesty than Chloe intended. Evelyn's eyes moved to the corner of the adjoining study, where 2 black leather bags rested beneath a built-in desk. They were plain, expensive, and deliberately unremarkable. Dominic had walked past them for months, without asking what they held, because he had long ago stopped being curious about the woman who protected him. Inside those bags were encrypted drives, tax schedules, shell company ledgers, internal transfer maps, offshore account trails, and the private memoranda that tied the Astor fortune to years of carefully disguised fraud. The family thought they were stripping her of status. Evelyn knew they were handing her the cleanest exit in America. She crossed the room with measured steps, the red fabric of her dress cutting through the pale closet like a warning flare. Dominic watched her pick up the 2 bags, and for one brief second his expression tightened, with irritation, not fear. He still believed the power in the room belonged to the person with the house, the mother, the mistress, and the name. Evelyn slipped the straps over her forearm. Then she removed her wedding ring, held it between 2 fingers, and dropped it into the open trash bag on top of the clothes his mother had crushed. "You missed one thing," she said. The room went quiet, but not from shock. It was the silence of people who had underestimated the wrong woman and had not yet realized the bill had arrived. Evelyn turned away from the closet, from the wine, from the white dress, from the black suit, from every polished insult pretending to be class. She did not look back at the clothes. She left with the 2 black leather bags. Evelyn crossed the upper hallway, with both black leather bags balanced in her left hand, her red dress moving like a clean line of fire through the cold symmetry of the Astor mansion. Behind her, the dressing room remained open, bright, and ugly in its perfection, with trash bags slumped against Italian marble and Chloe's white dress reflected in too many mirrors. Dominic followed as far as the doorway, not because he wanted to stop her, but because men like him preferred to witness the exact moment someone accepted defeat. His mother stood behind him, with one hand on her pearls, satisfied by the scene she believed she had created. Evelyn gave them nothing. The quiet housekeeper appeared at the end of the corridor and froze, her eyes dropping to the bags, then to Evelyn's face, as if she understood that this was not a wife being removed from a home. This was a witness leaving a crime scene with the evidence. Evelyn did not explain. She moved down the floating staircase, past the portrait wall, where Dominic's ancestors had been painted in dark suits, hunting coats, and expressions of inherited certainty. For years, those portraits had watched her host dinners, repair investor panic, correct tax exposure, and bury financial storms before they reached the family office. They had never applauded her. They had only expected the house to remain standing. At the bottom of the stairs, Dominic's voice followed her. "Evelyn, do not embarrass yourself by pretending this is strength." She paused, with one hand on the brass rail. "You are confusing silence with permission." His mother let out a thin, dismissive breath and told the housekeeper to call security if Evelyn tried to take anything that belonged to the family. Evelyn turned just enough for the light to catch the calm in her eyes. "Everything in my hands belongs to the truth." Chloe came down 3 steps behind Dominic, still holding her wine, still wearing the pleased expression of a woman who had mistaken proximity for power. "That sounds dramatic," she said. "It sounds poor." Dominic did not correct her. "That was useful." Evelyn continued through the foyer, where white orchids stood in tall glass vases, and the floor had been polished so highly that every person in it looked doubled, real above and distorted below. The 2 bags were heavier than clothing. One held the encrypted drives, labeled only by fiscal quarter and internal project code. The other held signed memoranda, personal authentication keys, printed tax schedules, side letters, and a small red notebook, where Evelyn had recorded dates Dominic had insisted should never appear together. She had not collected those files for revenge. She had collected them because smart women document what powerful men ask them to forget. At the front door, the private driver stepped forward, uncertain whether to help. Evelyn shook her head once. She carried the bags herself. Outside, the driveway curved half a mile, through old trees toward the iron gate, and beyond it waited the city Dominic believed he owned. Her phone showed 3 unread messages from the attorney, 2 from the secure compliance contact, and 1 encrypted confirmation request from the federal intake portal. Evelyn did not answer yet. She stood beneath the stone entrance for 1 quiet second, feeling the injury beneath her ribs settle into something colder and more useful. 12 years could not be undone in a doorway, but they could be audited. Behind the glass, Dominic remained visible in his black suit, framed by the mansion like a man posing inside his own myth. Chloe leaned close to him, speaking into his ear. His mother looked toward the closet upstairs, already managing the mess, already believing that order had been restored. Evelyn lifted the first bag into the back seat of the waiting car, then the second. Before she entered, she looked once at the house, not with longing, but with recognition. It had never been a home. It had been a vault with chandeliers. The driver asked where she wanted to go. Evelyn opened the car door, her red dress bright against the black leather interior, and gave the address of a federal building downtown. Then she opened her phone, entered the final authentication code, and sent the confirmation. The gate began to part. The Astor family had packed her clothes into trash bags. Evelyn had packed their empire into 2. The federal building downtown did not look dramatic enough for the kind of empire it was about to open. It had beige stone, narrow windows, security glass, and a lobby that smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and old air conditioning set several degrees too low. Evelyn walked in, with both black leather bags and her vivid red dress, passing through the metal detector without flinching while the guards checked her identification. No one there cared about the Astor name in the way gala guests did. That was the first comfort she had felt all morning. Upstairs, in a conference room, with gray carpet and a long table scarred by years of government use, Evelyn placed the 2 bags in front of the senior agent and the SEC attorneys. She did not sit until they invited her to. She did not perform grief. She opened the first bag, removed a hard case of encrypted drives, and arranged them by quarter, with the same precision she had once used to save Dominic from boardroom humiliation. "This is not a divorce complaint," she said. "This is a map." The senior agent studied her for a moment, then pushed a legal pad closer. Evelyn began with the oldest shell company, the one Dominic had called a temporary bridge, when a private acquisition needed to look cleaner than it was. From there, she traced the pattern across 6 years of filings, showing how phantom consulting fees moved through Delaware entities, Caribbean accounts, and charitable vehicles that photographed well but functioned poorly under scrutiny. She explained which numbers were inflated, which losses were buried, which loans were quietly cross-collateralized, and which signatures tied Dominic personally to decisions he had always described as administrative. Every sentence tightened the room. Every document removed another layer of his protection. The attorneys asked direct questions, and Evelyn answered them without embellishment. When they asked why she had waited, she looked down at her left hand, at the bare place where the ring had been. For one still second, the polished discipline around her face thinned, and the woman beneath it had to breathe, through the cost of what loyalty had done to her. Then she looked back up. "Because I believed marriage meant protecting the person beside me," she said. "This morning, I learned he had been standing behind me, with paperwork designed to cut me out." No one interrupted her after that. The second bag contained the private memoranda, internal tax schedules, authentication keys, transfer summaries, and the red notebook, with dates, initials, and short descriptions written in Evelyn's careful hand. She identified Dominic's phrases, his approval patterns, the accounts his mother had pressured staff to keep invisible, and the luxury assets Chloe had already begun treating like future possessions. She did not need to insult Chloe. The ledger did it better. By late afternoon, the agents had copied the drives, sealed the originals, and placed evidence tags on documents that had once lived beneath Dominic's desk in rooms filled with imported rugs and quiet lies. Evelyn signed her statement page by page. Her signature did not shake. When the senior agent warned her that the investigation could become public and that Dominic would likely try to discredit her, Evelyn glanced at the 2 empty bags on the table. "He already did," she said. "He just chose the wrong witness." The attorneys explained the next steps: emergency asset restraints, coordination with federal investigators, preservation notices, subpoenas, and a sealed timeline that would move faster than Dominic's public relations team could understand. Evelyn listened carefully, corrected one account number, and supplied a backup password from memory. Outside the window, Manhattan was turning hard and silver under the evening lights. Somewhere uptown, Dominic was probably accepting sympathy from people who thought he had finally freed himself from a difficult wife. Evelyn stood, gathered the empty bags, and felt the strange weight of not carrying his secrets anymore. For the first time in 12 years, her hands were light. You see, this is where most people misunderstand power. They think power is the mansion, the black suit, the family name engraved on a private elevator, or the woman in white standing close enough to look chosen. They think humiliation works because the person being humiliated will panic, plead, or prove their worth in front of people who have already decided not to see it. But real power often sits quietly in the person who knows the system better than the man taking applause for it. Tell me, what would you do if the people who used your mind treated your heart like a disposable inconvenience? Evelyn Carlyle did not answer that question with rage. She answered it with sequence, evidence, timing, and silence. And by that evening, that silence had followed Evelyn Carlyle into a furnished apartment 22 floors above a quieter side street, where the city lights spread beneath her like a circuit board. The place was nothing like the Astor Mansion. No marble staircase, no portrait wall, no closet large enough to be mistaken for love. There was one bedroom, one narrow kitchen, a gray sofa, a borrowed lamp, and 2 black leather bags standing empty beside the door. Evelyn remained in her red dress, because she had not yet been ready to change out of the last thing they saw her wearing. For the first time, since leaving the mansion, there was no one watching her posture, no one measuring her usefulness, no one waiting for her to make wealth look graceful. She sat on the edge of the sofa and placed her left hand against her chest, then lowered it to the bare place on her finger. The skin looked pale where the ring had been. That small absence hurt more than the trash bags. It hurt because the ring had not represented Dominic for a long time. It had represented the version of herself who kept believing there was still a moral line he would not cross. Her face stayed composed, but her breathing tightened. One tear reached the corner of her eye, and she wiped it away before it could fall. Not because tears were weakness, because this one did not deserve a ceremony. The phone on the coffee table lit up with a secure message from the compliance contact. Evelyn stared at it for 5 seconds before opening it. Emergency preservation notice acknowledged. Asset restraint package under review. Federal coordination pending. She read the words twice, not with satisfaction, but with the slow recognition that the machine had begun to move. Across town, Dominic still had hours, maybe a day, before the first lock closed around his accounts. He would spend that time planning speeches, managing gossip, and letting Chloe try on rooms that had never belonged to her. Evelyn stood and walked to the window. The apartment glass reflected a woman in red, 34 years old, elegant, wounded, and no longer available for use. Her phone lit again. The first offshore account had been flagged, then a private credit line tied to Astor collateral, then a notice connected to the charitable vehicle Dominic's mother had loved mentioning at benefit dinners. Evelyn did not smile. She took out a notepad, wrote the time, wrote the sequence, and underlined one phrase: no more protection. Then she finally unzipped one empty leather bag, removed the small backup key she had hidden inside the lining, and placed it in a plain white envelope for the attorney. The room was quiet enough for her to hear the elevator moving somewhere beyond the wall. For 12 years, she had worked in the background, while Dominic mistook her restraint for dependence. Now the background was gone. At 9:42 p.m., the secure portal sent one final confirmation, and Evelyn watched the words appear in clean black text. Action authorized. She turned off the lamp, left the city lights to fill the room, and whispered to no one, "Now learn what I kept from happening." By the next evening, Dominic Astor stood beneath a ceiling of crystal chandeliers at the company anniversary gala, wearing an elegant black suit tailored so precisely it seemed designed to deny the existence of consequence. The ballroom occupied the top floor of a private club overlooking Manhattan, with glass walls, white orchids, brass fixtures, and a stage built beneath the glowing Astor global emblem. Investors moved through the room, with champagne flutes and careful compliments. Reporters waited near the velvet rope. Board members shook Dominic's hand, as if the world still belonged to men who could make risk look like vision. Chloe Beaumont arrived at his side in a white dress, with a soft neckline, pearl earrings, and the practiced fragility of a woman who wanted every camera to mistake possession for romance. Dominic let her hold his arm. That was not affection. It was branding. His mother stood near the front table, greeting donors with the pleased expression of a woman who believed the family had corrected an inconvenience. She spoke of fresh beginnings, private resilience, and the burden of leadership, all while avoiding Evelyn's name, with the discipline of someone stepping around broken glass. Dominic approved of that. The less people said about his wife, the faster the room would accept Chloe as the new shape of his life. Still, small questions moved beneath the music. Where was Evelyn? Why had she left so quickly? Why had the finance committee postponed 2 calls that afternoon? Dominic answered with confidence, not clarity. Personal transitions are never elegant, he told one investor. But the company is stronger than ever. He believed it, because he needed the sentence to sound true. Across the ballroom, Chloe laughed at something a media executive said and looked toward the cameras, as though she had already rehearsed being photographed beside power. She did not understand balance sheets, debt exposure, tax liability, or the difference between owning wealth and standing near it. Dominic preferred that. A woman who did not ask financial questions was easier to decorate with diamonds. At 8:17 p.m., the program began. The lights dimmed slightly, and Dominic walked onto the stage as a video montage showed towers, hospital donations, scholarship ceremonies, clean energy renderings, and aerial shots of properties whose ownership had passed through more entities than any guest would ever know. He spoke smoothly about legacy. He praised discipline. He called Astor Global a monument to trust, American ambition, and family stewardship, while the machinery of federal scrutiny was already moving beneath his polished words. No one interrupted him. That was the last uninterrupted minute he owned. In Evelyn's apartment 22 floors above the quieter side street, her laptop sat open on the gray coffee table. She had changed into a simple red silk blouse and black trousers, her hair pinned back, her face bare of gala makeup. The black leather bags stood empty by the door, no longer evidence containers, no longer symbols of escape. They were just bags now. On the screen, a secure case dashboard updated in intervals, while a muted financial channel showed Dominic at the podium. Evelyn watched him speak about stewardship with the steady attention of a surgeon observing a patient who had ignored every warning sign. He looked polished. He looked expensive. He looked completely unaware that several federal notices were already moving through banks, clearinghouses, trust administrators, and overseas compliance offices. Back at the ballroom, Dominic lifted one hand toward the crowd. "Tonight is not simply about where we have been," he said. "It is about the future we are brave enough to claim." Chloe smiled from the front row, her white dress bright beneath the stage lights. His mother lifted her chin, proud and still. Then, near the side wall, Dominic's chief financial advisor looked down at his phone and stopped moving. A second advisor checked his own screen. A board member leaned toward another, whispering with a face that had lost its social polish. Dominic continued speaking, but his eyes caught the disturbance at the edge of the room. For half a beat, irritation touched his jaw. He thought someone had mishandled timing. He thought this was a staff problem. He did not, yet understand that the staff had nothing left to fix. The chief financial advisor reached the stage steps before Dominic finished his sentence. He did not interrupt loudly. He leaned in, with the careful panic of a man who understood that wealthy rooms punish visible fear, then whispered something so close to Dominic's ear that the microphone caught only a brief break in rhythm. Dominic's fingers tightened around the edge of the podium. His face did not collapse. It hardened, as if he could force reality to respect the event schedule. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, lowering his voice into the familiar register he used when asking investors to trust him, "we are making a small technical adjustment." No one believed him. Phones began lighting up across the ballroom, not with gossip now, but with alerts from banking contacts, market feeds, legal assistants, and private wealth managers who were suddenly using urgent language. An offshore account had been restricted under an emergency court-backed order. A domestic credit facility had been suspended. Trading restrictions had been placed on Astor-linked holdings. A trust administrator had issued a preservation notice. The words moved from screen to screen faster than Dominic could deny them. Chloe looked from one face to another, her smile still arranged, but no longer connected to confidence. His mother stood near the front table, with her hand pressed to the back of a chair, reading a message through narrowed eyes. The board members stopped pretending to socialize. They clustered in small, expensive groups, speaking in controlled voices that only made the fear sharper. Dominic stepped away from the podium, leaving the Astor Global emblem glowing behind him like an accusation. "Get legal on the phone," he told the advisor. His voice came out thinner than he intended. "Now." The advisor looked at him with the terrible obedience of someone who had already tried. "They are all calling us." At the ballroom entrance, 2 federal agents entered first, followed by several more in dark suits, with official badges visible at their belts, there to serve preservation orders and secure immediate access to records before anyone inside the company could bury them. They did not rush. They did not need to. Their calm was more devastating than force. A senior agent approached the event coordinator, showed documentation, and was directed toward Dominic with a professionalism that stripped the room of its glamour. The music lowered. Not stopped dramatically, just reduced by someone at the sound station, who understood that pretending the gala was normal had become impossible. Dominic saw the agents and turned toward his mother. For the first time, that night, he looked not offended, but trapped inside a calculation that had failed. His right hand trembled around the champagne flute Chloe had pushed back into his fingers earlier for photographs. He set it down too quickly, and pale wine moved, over the rim, onto the white linen. The spill spread toward a gold place card, with his name on it. Across town, Evelyn watched the live broadcast shift from celebration to confusion. The financial channel had cut away from the polished speech and was now replaying footage of federal agents entering the ballroom, while a lower banner reported emergency asset restraints connected to Astor Global and related entities. Evelyn sat still, a glass of water untouched beside her laptop. She did not cheer. She did not call anyone. She simply noted the time, 8:29 p.m. And watched the system do what love had once prevented her from doing. Back at the gala, the senior agent asked Dominic to step aside for a private conversation. Dominic tried to recover the old voice, the one that had convinced bankers, donors, and judges of character to lean toward him. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "You can speak with my counsel." The senior agent's expression did not change. "Your counsel has been notified." That answer removed the last useful wall between Dominic and the room. Reporters lifted their phones and recorders. Guests turned their bodies away from him, not far enough to seem rude, but far enough to avoid being photographed too close. Chloe took one half step back. His mother noticed. Dominic noticed, too. The empire did not fall with broken glass or raised voices. It fell through restricted accounts, sealed files, unanswered calls, and the quiet withdrawal of people whose loyalty had always been leased, never owned. Dominic looked at the advisor again, but the man had no rescue to offer. He looked at Chloe, but she was staring at her own phone. He looked toward the glowing emblem behind him, and for the first time in his adult life, the name Astor could not open a door. Chloe Beaumont understood loss faster than anyone in the ballroom, because she had never loved Dominic Astor beyond what his name could purchase. While federal agents guided him away from the stage and board members retreated into urgent calls, she stood near the front table in her white dress, scrolling through headlines that turned his fortune into a public hazard. Astor-linked assets frozen, credit lines suspended, federal inquiry expands. She read each sentence with a stillness that looked delicate from a distance and merciless up close. Dominic turned toward her, as if she might become the one soft thing left in the room, but Chloe's eyes were not on his face. They were on the numbers disappearing from his life. "Tell me there are private accounts," she said quietly. Dominic's mouth opened, then closed without producing the command he wanted. His hands were steady enough to hide fear from strangers, but not from a woman trained to notice luxury slipping away. "This is temporary," he said. "Legal will contain it." Chloe looked past him at the senior agent, the frozen faces of investors, the reporters recording from behind raised phones, and the advisor, who had gone pale while trying to reach counsel. She did not believe temporary. She believed access. She believed security codes, property deeds, diamond insurance, penthouse keys, resort memberships, and the soft automatic obedience that came when people thought a man was still liquid. Dominic had given her all the symbols and none of the structure. Evelyn had held the structure. That realization moved across Chloe's face like a curtain being pulled back. His mother reached for her arm, perhaps expecting loyalty, perhaps demanding performance, but Chloe stepped away before the older woman could touch her. "Not now," Chloe said. It was not loud, but it cut cleanly through the private chaos around them. Dominic stared at her. "Chloe, stay close." She glanced at the federal agents, then at the cameras, then at the wine stains spreading across the linen near his gold place card. Close to what? The question did what the investigation had not. It exposed the emotional bankruptcy beneath the financial one. Dominic's jaw flexed, and for a moment he looked like a man trying to remember which version of himself usually worked on people. The charming husband was useless. The visionary executive was under investigation. The wealthy protector no longer had visible wealth to protect anyone with. Chloe removed the bracelet he had given her earlier that week, a thin diamond piece chosen in a private showroom, where the sales associate had called her elegant because Dominic was paying. She placed it on the cocktail table beside an untouched glass and smoothed the front of her white dress. I am not being photographed in this, she said. Dominic's voice dropped. You are leaving because of a headline? Chloe tilted her head, and the false innocence finally vanished. I came for the life you promised, Dominic. Do not act surprised when I refuse to be photographed beside the ruin. His mother inhaled sharply, but even she had no useful insult ready. The room had become too practical for class performance. Chloe collected her small clutch, turned away from the Astor table, and walked toward the side exit, with the efficient calm of someone avoiding a bad investment. A reporter called her name, but she did not stop. She had entered the gala as the replacement wife in white. She exited as evidence that Dominic's world had never inspired devotion, only appetite. Dominic stood where she left him, black suit flawless, cuff links shining, face drained of the authority that used to arrive before he spoke. Around him, the ballroom adjusted. Guests who had praised his leadership an hour earlier now spoke in conditional phrases. Board members used words like exposure, distance, resignation, and independent review. The private wealth managers avoided eye contact. His mother tried to summon old dignity, but her hands shook against the pearls at her throat. Dominic looked toward the exit Chloe had used, then toward the stage, where his own name still glowed above the room. There was no dramatic collapse. There was something worse. He remained standing, while every borrowed illusion walked away from him one by one. Across town, Evelyn closed the financial channel and sat in the quiet of her apartment. She knew Chloe would leave. She knew the board would distance itself. She knew Dominic would soon discover the cruelest truth about purchased loyalty. It does not break. It expires. 3 weeks later, Dominic Astor arrived at Evelyn Carlisle's new office, without an appointment, without an entourage, and without the invisible weather system of privilege that used to enter rooms before him. The office was on the 31st floor of a clean glass building in Midtown, not grand enough for Astor vanity, but sharp enough for Evelyn's future. Frosted panels, black chairs, a walnut desk, and one framed city photograph gave the space a discipline the mansion had never possessed. Evelyn stood near the window in a vivid red tailored blazer, reviewing a restructuring proposal with the calm focus of a woman whose life had stopped orbiting a man's appetite. When the assistant informed her that Dominic was in reception, Evelyn did not ask how he looked. She already knew collapse had many costumes. He entered in a dark overcoat that had once seemed expensive and now looked tired from being worn by a man with nowhere to command. His black suit was creased at the sleeves. His face carried several sleepless nights, not in dramatic ruin, but in the gray restraint of someone who had been calling lawyers, banks, board members, and former friends only to hear careful distance in every answer. In his hand was a folder from his defense team. Evelyn remained standing behind the desk. You have 10 minutes. Dominic looked at the chair, as if sitting would make him smaller. Then he sat anyway. They are overreaching, he said. His voice tried to find its old authority and failed halfway through the sentence. The government is using your statement as a weapon. You can correct it. Evelyn watched him without anger. Anger would have given him too much access. Correct which part? The intent, he said quickly. The structure was complicated. You know that. You know how these vehicles worked. If you tell them I relied on advisors, if you say you misunderstood the approvals, this becomes a civil matter. Fines, settlements, maybe leadership changes. It does not have to become prison. There it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. A request for her to crawl back under the falling building and hold up the beam. Evelyn walked around the desk slowly and sat across from him, close enough for him to see that the bare place on her finger had healed into ordinary skin. You want me to lie? Dominic's jaw tightened. I want you to remember we were married. I remember everything. The words were soft enough to be civilized and sharp enough to end a room. He leaned forward, gripping the folder, until the paper bent beneath his fingers. I built that company. Evelyn's eyes did not move. You inherited a platform, bought applause, and confused secrecy with intelligence. I built the parts that kept you safe. For the first time, his gaze fell. Not to cry, not to beg in some theatrical way. It fell because the old hierarchy had nowhere left to stand. My mother was wrong that morning, he said. Chloe was a mistake. The closet the bags, all of it went too far. Evelyn almost admired the efficiency of it, the way he tried to reduce 12 years of use into one ugly morning. No, Dominic. That morning was not the betrayal. It was the summary. His fingers loosened around the folder. Outside the window, traffic moved along the avenue with indifferent precision. People crossed streets, couriers carried envelopes, office lights blinked on in towers, where no one cared that a billionaire had discovered consequences. Dominic swallowed, and his voice thinned into something more honest, because it had fewer options. If this goes to trial, the company collapses with me. Employees, investors, every foundation account tied to us, all of it. Evelyn stood. Then it should have been protected by a better man. He looked up at her, and for a second, the man in the black suit was not a titan, not a husband, not even an enemy. He was just a defendant asking the woman he discarded to falsify mercy. Evelyn, please. She walked to the door and opened it herself. No, Dominic. I only stopped protecting you from what you built. He did not move at first. The sentence held him in place more firmly than any agent had. Then he rose, slow and unsteady, the folder pressed against his side like it could still contain an escape. At the threshold, he turned back, searching her face for the woman who once translated his panic into strategy. She was gone. Evelyn's final words were quiet, exact, and colder than revenge. Betrayal has a price. Yours came with receipts. Dominic left her office without another word. There is a truth about betrayal that wealthy rooms rarely admit. It is never only the act people see. It is the private arithmetic that comes before it, the quiet calculation that someone's loyalty is cheaper than your appetite, someone's intelligence is yours to use, and someone's dignity can be packed into trash bags without consequence. But consequence has a memory. It remembers every document hidden under polished language, every insult disguised as family tradition, every moment a woman was told to be grateful for a seat at a table she had been quietly keeping from collapsing. You see, the most dangerous person in any empire is not always the one standing at the podium. Sometimes it is the one behind the numbers, behind the silence, behind the door everyone forgot to respect. And when that person finally stops protecting the lie, betrayal does not explode. It balances the account. 6 months later, Evelyn Carlisle walked through the lobby of a financial ethics summit in Washington, D.C. Wearing a vivid red suit cut, with clean shoulders and a narrow gold belt at her waist. The building was not built for spectacle. It was built for influence. Pale stone floors, high glass panels, federal flags, and quiet security lines gave the morning a seriousness that no ballroom could imitate. Evelyn moved through it, without rushing, her black leather briefcase in one hand, her conference badge clipped neatly below her collarbone, her name printed, without anyone else's attached to it. No asterisk attached to her name. No wife of whispered before her accomplishments. No charitable decoration placed beside a powerful man for photographs. Just Evelyn Carlisle, invited keynote advisor on corporate accountability, forensic finance, and restructuring after executive misconduct. In the main hall, senior attorneys, compliance officers, pension fund directors, and federal consultants waited, with notebooks open. They were not there to pity her. They were there to learn from her. That was freedom in its sharpest form. Not escape. Recognition. Evelyn stepped onto the stage beneath soft white lights, and for a moment she remembered the mansion closet, the trash bags, Chloe's white dress, Dominic's black suit, and his mother's cold certainty that humiliation could erase a woman. The memory no longer cut. It had become evidence of distance. She placed both hands on the podium and looked out at the room. Weak governance does not begin with bad numbers, she said. It begins when powerful people believe no one close to them will ever tell the truth. No one moved. They listened because she had survived the cost of that sentence. After the session, an emerging executive approached her and said she had changed how their board planned to review internal controls. Evelyn thanked the executive with warmth, then walked alone to the terrace outside the hall. The air was cold enough to sharpen the edge of the afternoon, somewhere near 42 degrees Fahrenheit, and the city stretched beyond the railing, with its gray buildings, moving cars, and offices full of people making decisions that would either protect or poison other lives. Evelyn looked down at her left hand. The mark from the ring was gone. In its place was ordinary skin, strong and unclaimed. Her phone vibrated, with a news alert about Dominic's ongoing trial, but she did not open it. Some doors did not deserve to be walked through twice. She slipped the phone into her briefcase, lifted her face toward the pale winter sun, and let the silence belong entirely to her. She had left with 2 bags. She had returned with her name. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, reflection, and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.